But none of it brought me a sense of fulfillment. None of it. Because I had these burning questions with him. I can't believe that I'm just on this planet in order to work, earn money, have a house, have a car, have friends, lead a social life. Even socially, I was very successful. They had lots and lots of people that I saw as my friends. They saw me as their friend. But I hated. I started to hate more and more the parties and the endless dinners and things that I went to, because it all seemed so meaningless. And people's conversations seemed so meaningless. So I was desperate to find real meaning in my life. So, in actual fact, that was part of the reason why I orchestrated, or why I arranged for myself to travel overseas on the study tour for a year, was I was hoping, against hope, that somehow if I just got out there and travelled for this year, I might just stumble across some of the answers that I was looking for. I didn't directly stumble across the answers, except I did find this book that we spoke about just now, which certainly had a huge impact on me. But strangely enough, what also started to happen at the time when I was overseas, but I didn't know what was going on, is I started to have spontaneous flashbacks of knowledge gained in previous lifetimes. Unfortunately, because I had no real knowledge of what was going on at that time, I seriously believed that I was losing my mind.
Is this not a good thing in terms of what you shared about the mind?
Well, probably, but I mean, at that stage, in my mid-20s, I really felt that I might be going insane. Anyway, again, to cut a long story short, I went through all of that, which had a deep impact on me. I found this book of Carlos Castaneda, which also made a deep impact on me. And then I got back to Cape Town. And I knew that okay, I was not back. I had to start up my career again. I had to earn a living again, buy myself another car, find a house to live in, do all the normal things that normal people do. And I just couldn't put my heart into it. I kept thinking, gosh, I've got to find meaning. If I can't find meaning in all of this, then what's the point? My life might as well end right now. Anyway, one morning I just woke up, and there was the very strong feeling in me that I needed to go into Cape Town, and I needed to go to the bookstores. The way I rationally interpreted that for myself was that I might find a book which could just possibly point me in the right direction. Even if it didn't provide me with the answers I was seeking, it might just point me in the right direction. So I duly did that. I still didn't have a car, because I still didn't have a job, so I still didn't have any money. So anyway, I put myself on a train, and I got off in Cape Town, and I started to go to all the bookstores that I could think of. And I wandered around for hours, going from bookstore to bookstore, and nothing jumped out at me. Or as you said, no book fell in my head. And nothing appealed to me. I mean, I spent hours in the bookstores. And eventually, feeling quite dejected, I ended up walking up one of the streets in Cape Town, which was, at that particular time, very little known. In other words, it wasn't a traditional shopping area. And it was mainly sort of small businesses that was up that area. And certainly not the sort of street in which you would find a bookstore. But for some reason, I just found myself walking up the street. And then, lo and behold, I suddenly came across this tiny little bookstore. And I stopped dead in my tracks, looking at the books displayed in the window. And they all seemed fascinating to me, although I didn't know what half of them meant. I only discovered later that it was actually an esoteric bookstore. But in that stage of my life, I didn't even know what esotericism meant. Anyway, I felt so drawn that I went into this bookstore. And I started to just look at the books that were on the shelves, not knowing what I was looking for or what I was hoping to find. But I noticed a man in the shop that was very obviously the owner of the bookstore, and he was busy talking to another client. And I noticed that he kept looking at me out of the corner of his eye. Not knowing why he was looking at me, I assumed that he was watching me in case I was going to steal a book. Anyway, so I kept my hands behind my back and I didn't pick up any books in case I got turfed out of the bookstore. And his client that he was talking to eventually left, and he came over to me and he asked me if he could help me. And I said, and then I felt really foolish. I said, well, I must be honest with you. I'm looking for a book, but I really don't know what I'm looking for. And he stood and he looked at me for a long time. And then he said the strangest thing of all. He said to me, I think, and you must please forgive the French, but I'm going to express it the way he said it to me. I think you should get your ass to me every Sunday morning. I had no idea where he was coming from. I was absolutely mortified that a complete stranger should tell me to get my ass to him every Sunday morning. I said to him, for what? He said, we're going to restore your memory. I said, I beg your pardon? He said, we are going to restore your memory. I said, memory of what? He said, being a Toltec. I said, oh, what? I had no idea. Because although I said to you, I'd read Carlos Castaneda's first book, but there was no mention in the first book. Not as far as I can remember, but I didn't think Toltec. But certainly on that morning when I was in the bookstore, I still not registered what Toltec is. So I said to him, what's a Toltec? So I said, come here on Sunday morning and we'll start working. Anyway, that's in that, so I just left the shop, wondering what on earth had happened. And then I started to think, maybe this is one of those moments that I'm going insane again. Anyway, I didn't feel I was insane, but I couldn't make head or tail out of it. So, but something pulled me. So I found myself there on the Sunday morning, as we had agreed. And then he started to work with me on what is commonly called restoration of memory. So yes, that's the story.
Most people in their 20s would still believe that they were immortal and would be doing all the parties and all the other things that you mentioned before. So it seemed like a very early age for you to be seeking those very deep questions. Did you ever find with hindsight that your mother or your father had any Toltec knowledge or any influence?
No, I suppose I started to search so early because I was an absolute delinquent. So by my mid-20s I had done what most people were still trying to do. No, but seriously, both my parents were devout Christians, and they would certainly have looked upon anything which didn't belong to the Christian church as being from the devil. So, no, there was nothing from that side. However, I might add that, again, I didn't know it at the time, but I understood it after I found the Toltec teachings again, and after my own memory had been restored, is that my mother, as it turns out, had been a natural seer. By natural, in other words, she had no apparent training in this lifetime. I spoke earlier about natural aptitude. Well, my mother just had a natural aptitude for seeing in this lifetime. So she used to get very clear visions of what was either busy happening, but nobody was talking about, and nobody was revealing, or something that was about to happen. In other words, something in the future. However, I remember as a child being very distraught by all this, was my mother, whenever she had a spontaneous scene, would burst into tears, reach for the Bible and start praying frantically, because she was convinced it was the devil that was visiting her.